welcome you all to this pre-budget discussion, which will be done by our student panelists. COVID-19, which has emerged as a black swan event and stifled the entire global economy. The government across the globe, as well as in India, has initiated the fiscal and monetary stimulus programs in order to combat the damaging economic effects caused by this deadly virus. Having understood the emergency of bringing the economy back into the growth trajectories, the theme of today's discussion, which is connecting the dots, Budget 2021, is steering a way towards matching with expectations coined out by our student panelists who have very vividly delineated the flow of today's discussion. The Budget 2022 will be tabled on the 1st of February. Along with the quantum of slippage in financial year Budget 2021, investors would watch out for the government spending plans, especially in the allocation for health, education, and infrastructure spending. In particular, how the government plans to bear the vaccine cost would be the matter of interest. So what is that Budget 2021 is going to have in its platter? Before that, I would request our Dean Sir to set the context of the program. Professor Ashin Mishra, sir, over to you, sir.
As Sikta just mentioned, that we're going to have a budget. As we stand today, India also is going through one of such very, very difficult and dark moments. And this budget in particular would be very, very keenly watched. Dr. Manmohan Singh, with whom I had the proud privilege of working early in my career, used to say that for any finance minister, there are three words which are very important. He was quoting from Richard Musgrave, who is considered to be the greatest authority in public finance, who used to say that there are three words, there are three basic issues that any finance minister in any country has to grapple with. They were allocation, distribution, and stabilization, which essentially means what kind of allocational priority you have. Sikta mentioned about education, health, infrastructure. What would be the allocational priority? How would distributive justice be ensured, which essentially means how the tax system is going to pan out. And then most importantly, economic stabilization, so that you don't have very high price rise, your unemployment is at acceptable levels, your currency is basically stable. So these are the three things I think any finance minister has to basically take into account. Now, the economic survey was laid before the parliament 2 days back, and it has some very interesting macro parameters to offer. Firstly, it clearly realizes that this year, the gross domestic product is likely to decelerate by about 7.7%. But very interestingly, this deceleration is also combined with a robust agricultural growth, which is around 3.5%. So therefore, along with economic downturn, there has been a very robust agricultural food stability that India is also witnessing. The consumer price index also seems to be slightly veering away from what we call as the glide path. It is around 6.6%. So it's a matter of not enormous concern, but it's a matter which must be kept in mind. Credit growth by the banks is around 6%, which is quite low. The fiscal deficit is a matter of concern, which is around 4.6%. This is the expectation. So as against this, as I mentioned, apart from agricultural growth, India is sitting on a very comfortable foreign exchange budget of about 586 billion. And for the first time, after a very, very long time, I would say that India will witness a current account surplus. Our exports are going to be more than imports. For the first time, it will be plus 3.1% of the GDP. So now let me come to the basic issues which we are trying to address. One is should the government go for further fiscal stimulus, and what would be its impact on growth, on inflation, and the whole host of things. Now, Blanchett, very famous economist, he believes that as long as your cost of borrowing, that is the interest on debt, is more than growth, I think it makes a lot of sense to borrow. He coined this whole concept of interest rate growth differential. And the assessment has been that during the last 10 years, the cost of interest to public borrowing has been around 8.8%, whereas the nominal growth has been around 12.8%, which basically shows that India has a healthy negative IRGD. So therefore, the strong message is that India can go for growth, can go for borrowing, and borrowing will not be disrupting fiscal stability. Having said this, there are a few caveats that the economic survey has put, namely that the fiscal stimulus that we are talking of must improve in asset creation, both physical and human. That's very, very important. Though it is agreed that we should go for fiscal borrowing, fiscal deficit, do we do it by increasing the public borrowing, which has already brisked by about 4 lakh crores. Last year, we had estimated that borrowing would be around 8 lakh crores. So the assumption, the assessment is that another 4 lakh crores would have been borrowed by end of March. So one thought is that you go for bonds. The other thought is that go for cess, go for increasing tax rates, go for increasing or reintroducing the wealth tax. So there is a huge debate on this, that is it the time that India goes, what Piketty in his wonderful book Capital mentioned, that we could go for a global wealth tax. Is there a case for increasing the tax rate to 40% on the super rich? So many people believe that that's the need of the hour. And I think we cannot turn the clock back on this. But very interestingly, the IRS Association, Indian Revenue Service Association, in a letter to the finance minister and the prime minister, have mentioned that there is a strong case for increasing the tax rate, the corporate tax rate, to 40% for those who are earning more than 1 crore.
Thank you so much, sir, for your illuminating thoughts. Yes, it's very likely that we are going to miss out the fiscal deficit of 3.5% of GDP. Doesn't matter. It's always better to borrow rather than to print notes. We have with us Director Sir, Professor Saroj Mahapatra. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sikta. This is a year, this is an epoch-making year. You know, this year is once in 2 millennium this year has come. Year of pandemic, you call it, year of, unprecedented. I think it is very, very difficult for the best crystal gauger to actually predict the budget this year. That this year, this year of lockdown has really disturbed the whole world, disrupted the entire world in a big way. You will see from the IMF report that all the economies in the world, they have seen almost negative growth excepting China. China has seen a 2-point-something positive growth. All other economies have seen negative growth, right? India has seen a negative growth of almost 8%, right? But the good thing is IMF itself predicts that India will have the highest positive growth in the current year, right? Almost 11% or 11 point something, right? And that's a good sign. And we will be crossing even China. That's what is the prediction. Now, if the world outside is believing in India, it happens only when people inside the country are doing right. Why our neighbors trust us? Because we must be doing something right, you know. The noise that is coming out of our house must be something giving a positive vibe to outside world. That's why we are getting it. So it's a year of positivity. I believe that I think the time has come to shrug all the negativity, all the lethargy from our mind and think very, very positive and work at respective levels, whether it's the individual or company level or at a national level. We join hands together.
Thank you so much, sir, for your encouraging words and for your constant encouragement and support. I would request Alisha Nanda, the host of this program, to take over further. Over to you, Alisha.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I, Alisha Nanda, on behalf of KIIT School of Management, welcome you to the annual pre-budget discussion by our student panels for the budget of 2021-22. The theme of the discussion this year is Connecting the Dots Budget 2021. Now, I would introduce you to the panel 1 members who will be talking about the finance sector, starting with the moderator, Prachinanda Behera from MBA 2, followed by the speakers Anish Raj from MBA 1, Sambit Acharya from MBA 1, and Rishika Singh from BBA 1. Over to you, Prachi.
Thanks, Anisha. So since you have spoken about reallocation and redistribution, I would like Anish to pitch in over here. Anish, we know that the banking sector is the key driver of the GDP, right? Whatever is happening in the country, it is related to the banking sector in some or the other way. So what do you think, what measures the banking sector is going to take to boost the economy?
Right, Prachi. So we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic took the whole world's economy to a spin, with everything halted and the economy plummeting to like minus 23.9% of its GDP in the April to June quarter for the year 2019-20, right? Now, with the vaccination drive around the corner, this year budget, the government may put revival instead of growth in the limelight. Okay, this is what is the need of the hour. We need the revival. Now, while talking about the revival, the banking sector would be the key player in the process of economic revival, considering the fact that we need the banking system strong and sound for the smooth operation of the financial sector. For this budget, the major challenge the government will be facing and they will have to deal with are first, getting the demands back on track, second, stepping up the investment, third, ending the credit crunch, and fourth, raising the spending without raising the inflation. Up to you, Prachi.
Okay, so you spoke about revival versus growth ratio. So as you know that the banking sector is already under a lot of NPAs, you know. So what do you think the government would do now so as to help it in reviving?
Right, Prachi, well said. So the first key point the government may want to focus on in this time of crisis is strengthening the banking system. But since the banks are already burdened with an NPA of around 8 lakh crores, which for a comparison accounts to multiple Make in India projects. So the very first thing the government may want to do is to recover the NPAs, for which it may implement the concept of bad banks under PA array that boils down to Public Sector Asset Rehabilitation Agency, where a separate bank will be created that will pool the NPAs of all the other banks and in return give the banks from which it has collected the NPA a certain percentage of asset, thus rendering the banks more liquid. Now, the bad banks would have a specialization in the recovery of NPA and would try to completely recover the amount of the given NPA, right? If the government is able to recover a big chunk of the NPA, it can serve towards a reduction in the India's fiscal deficit. As per my assumptions, for the implementation of bad banks would increase the fiscal deficit in the short run if the government is going for borrowings. But eventually, it would stabilize the economy in the long run by reducing the gap between the fiscal deficit and the NPAs.
Okay, so you were basically talking about we need to bridge the gap between the fiscal deficit and the NPAs. Okay,
right.
Rishika, I would want you to pitch in here, since taxation is a quintessential thing in case of economy. So do you think the government is going to shuffle the taxation system so much this time?
Yeah, Prachi. When I just talk about something related to shuffling over here, so when I look into the situation, for now, the government's biggest challenge is how to increase the revenue or the sources of revenue. Okay, so I think being a member of a finance team, they would be better served if they do not come up with a new tax, right? And but I just think that being in an improvement perspective, they may need to go for. So if I may just think of what could be possible areas where we could see a tax to come on, I don't see a change in a personal tax because they did a lot of personal changes in the personal tax in the previous budget, which I just want to make you to see that what actually happened previous year. observing superficially in 2020, government reduced the income tax rate, right? Whereas earlier we had to pay a tax income of 20% in the slab of 5 to 10 lakh. Now a 10% need to be paid in a slab of 5 to 7 lakh, right? And so you would think that income tax rate between 5 to 15 lakh have been reduced. This is something a very good news for overall while by seeing the figures over there. Okay, so but it was not so. The reality was that this type of life was a hyperbole, because government has said that there would be no exemptions in this new tax rate, whereas there used to be deduction in the prior tax rate.
Thank you so much, all of you. So we had the discussion regarding the facts, and we also tried to collect the statistics and all. So our speakers, clearly they have an optimistic approach while decoding the financial budget 2021. And hopefully the 3 pointers which Dean Sir has raised regarding the allocation, distribution and economic stabilization, hopefully this budget is going to take care of all of these. I would like to thank the speaker for providing us with such insights, and thank you to the wonderful audience out there. Thank you. Have a great day ahead.
Well, indeed, it was a very informative discussion. The entire finance team, congratulations to you all. Now, moving ahead, one of the major sectors, healthcare, expects more policies to safeguard our women's health that would ensure more women participation in the labor force, which will boost the economy. It also expects lower GST on health equipment, inclusion of action policy to boost the Make in India initiative. With this, I would like to introduce the panel 2 members who will be talking about the health and education sector, starting with the moderator, Medha Mishra from MBA 2, followed by the speakers, Huma Jamal from MBA 1, Riddhi Bhattacharya from BBA 1, and Gadhir Mansoora from BBA 1. Over to you, Medha.
So, getting back to the discussion, India is committed to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, and social sector development is the most important in reaching them. Progress in this sector has intrinsic and the instrumental value. It is needed even to build the $5 trillion economy faster. Inequalities in India have been increasing over time. COVID-19 has further widened them. In this context, focus on social sector spending and efficiency in delivery systems are essential. The Union Budget for 2021-22 can give medium-term direction to the social sector by increasing the allocations, particularly in the health and the education. A look at the social sector expenditure over the last few years shows that the share of education as the percentage of GDP has been stagnant around 2.8 to 3%, and in case of health, the expenditure as a percentage of GDP is 3.6%. So let's get focused on the education sector at first. My question is to you, Riddhi. In this context, the new education policy has been suggested. Would you like to highlight on the provisions made in the last year's budget?
Absolutely, Medha. Answering to your question, Medha, the Union Budget of 2020 proposed a new education policy, and along with it, rupees 99,300 crore worth of funding for the education sector in 2020 to 21, and about rupees 3,000 crore for skill development too. In comparison, an allocation of rupees 94,800 crore in the education sector was done in the previous year's Union Budget. India has been witnessing a nominal increment in allocation of education sector budget in the past 3 years. Statically, from rupees 85,000 crore in the year 2018 to rupees 94,500 crore in the year 2019, this year around 99,300 crore allocation is made to the budget of the education sector. In the financial year of 2020, the Department of Higher Education was allocated rupees 38,317.01 crore, while the School Education and Literacy Department was given rupees 56,536.63 crore. With worst of overall economic crisis and downturn the world has faced in 2020, we could not have expected a budget better than this, in my opinion. Over to you, Medha. Please continue.
Thank you, Riddhi. I totally agree with you. With all the economic crisis and downturn, we cannot expect better than this budget. So you have given the quite good synopsis of the last year's budget regarding the education sector. Moving on to the health sector, An increase in health expenditure is also important to take care of the present and the future pandemics. Given the constraints, health workers did exceptional work during this pandemic. Huma, would you like to highlight some major announcements and provision in the last year's budget?
Thank you, Medha. And I think everyone present over here agrees with you that the healthcare workers did an outstanding job during the pandemic. And that's why this COVID-19 pandemic crisis is a reminder of how much it is important to invest in a healthcare sector for any country. So talking about the Union Budget 2020, the Ministry of Health and Welfare received an allocation of rupees 67,112 crore, which is an increase of 3.9% over the revised estimate of 2019. And the Ministry of Ayush has been allocated 2,122 crore, while there is an allocation of 2,100 crore to the Department of Health and Research. The center also planned to expand the government's flagship health insurance scheme, which is Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So basically, this scheme provides a cover of rupees 5 lakh per family per year to about 10 crore families belonging to the poor and vulnerable population. Also, the allocation to the autonomous institute like the AIIMS and the Indian Council of Medical Research saw a surprisingly decrease of 5% at rupees 9,616 crore from what they got in 2019. In addition to this, the higher allocation has been made for Pradhan Mantri Swasthya Suraksha Yojana at rupees 6,020 crore, which is a 27% of increase. So, Medha, these are some of the major announcements that has been made in the 2020 budget.
That was quite insightful, Huma. But in my opinion, rural healthcare is one of the biggest challenges that is faced by the Health Ministry of India. With more than 70% population residing in the rural areas and having low level of the health facilities, mortality rates due to the diseases are on very high. So apart from the schemes and the provisions mentioned by Huma, Gadir, would you like to mention the provisions that the government made in the last year's budget regarding the rural healthcare?
Yes, definitely, Medha. Well, the rural healthcare in the previous year's budget is addressed with these points. First, well, the National Health Mission, NHM, received about 50% of the ministry's allocation, which amounts to rupees 33,400 crore in 2020-2021. Under the NHM, the rural component, that is the National Rural Health Mission, NRHM, had been allocated rupees 27,039 crore. And to be clear, the objective of the NHM is to ensure universal access to equitable, affordable, and quality healthcare services. Although now managed by the Health Ministry, the government focuses on ending open defecation via the Swachh Bharat mission and Jal Jeevan mission, which have brought piped water to houses. Will both have major impacts on health and sanitation.
Thank you, Gadir. That was a quite good information regarding the reforms in the rural areas. I hope the larger population residing in the rural areas get benefited from all these provisions. We hope that India is likely to double health spending in this fiscal year. So apart from the expectations mentioned by Huma, would you like to add more expectations to it, Gadir?
Yes, sure, Medha. I would like to emphasize on public spending on focus on mental health issues. With these points, first, bigger focus on public spending on healthcare. Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has told the entire world the importance of having strong healthcare sector to begin with. One of the primary expectations of this year's budget that there should be bigger focus on public spending on healthcare, of course. The second point is of our expectation coming from the Union Budget 2021 is to recognize the growing mental health problem in India and provide more budget for facilitating counseling across India, including the government schools. These are the expectations for 2021, and I hope it will be met soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Gadir, and thank you, everyone. After a few hours from now, we hope all our expectations do come true with respect to inclusion, policy discourse, and the mixed learning approach in the educational sector and health sector being the major focus of this year's budget. You being a very patient audience, thank you so much.
Well, absolutely. An illuminating discussion by all of you. Kudos to all. Now, moving ahead, while everyone is looking for a boost in infrastructure, we expect the government to focus on renewable energy resources, more liquidation, and pump more cash flow into the market. Indeed, it was a pleasant session. I would like to extend a hearty vote of thanks to our Director Sir, Dean Sir, and all the esteemed guests that we had today, along with our lovely faculty members who spared their valuable time out of their busy schedules to join us for the discussion.